Genetically Modified Foods and Negative Effects by Michael Darden. I'm going to show you why genetically modified foods are not safe, harmful to the environment, and cause economic inequality. Genetically modified foods are made by genetically modified foods are foods since genetically modified foods were approved. Genetically modified foods tested in animals have shown reproductive problems and infant mortality. More than half the babies of mother rats fed GM soy died within 3 weeks. Male rats and mice fed GM soy had changed testicles, including altered young sperm cells in the mice. The DNA of mouse embryos functioned differently when their parents ate GM soy. The longer mice were fed this GM corn, the less babies they had and the smaller their babies were. Babies of female rat fed GM soy were considerably smaller, and more than half died within 3 weeks. Female rats fed the soy showed changes in their ovaries and uterus, and by the third generation, most hamsters fed the soy were unable to even have babies. These genetically enhanced crops have linked to sterility, disease, and death in animals, as thousands of sheep, buffalo, and goats in India died after grazing on Bt cotton plants after harvest. Farmers in Europe and Asia say the cows, water buffaloes, chickens, and horses die from eating Bt corn varieties. And about 24 U.S. farmers report the Bt corn varieties caused widespread sterility in pigs or cows. Even the stomach lining of rats fed with GM potatoes showed excessive cell growth, a condition that may lead to cancer. Genetic engineering transfers genes across natural species barriers. It uses imprecise laboratory techniques that bear no resemblance to natural breeding. It is based on outdated concepts of how genes and cell works. Gene insertion is done either by shooting genes from a gene gun into a plate of cells or by using bacteria to invade the cell with foreign DNA. The altered cell is then cloned into a plant. GM plants such as soybean, corn, cottonseed, and canola have had foreign genes forced into their DNA. The inserted gene comes from species such as bacteria and viruses, which have never been in the human food supply. This genetic engineering process creates massive collateral damage, causing mutations in hundreds of thousands of locations throughout the plant's DNA. Natural genes can be deleted or permanently turned off, and hundreds may change their behavior. Even the inserted gene can be damaged or rearranged. It may create proteins that can trigger allergies and promote disease. People do not realize how much genetically modified foods we actually have in our country. This is just a small list of the food that have been changed and genetically modified. Right now, in the United States, almost 85% of our corn grown is genetically modified, and almost 90% of the canola that we all use has been greatly changed. Genetically modified food crops and their companion pesticides and herbicides wreak a lot of havoc on the environment, including polluting the air, the water, and the soil. Glyphosate is marketed by the Monsanto company as the herbicide Roundup. It is an effective antibiotic which can destroy soil quality and thus impair the plant's nutritional value as well. Cross-pollination between genetically modified foods and non-genetically modified food crops is common as well, and it can destroy the natural plant varieties in the wild. Despite the claims that pesticides and genetically modified food crops can relieve farmers of crop-destroying insects and plants, the opposite is shown to be true, as farmers now in the Midwest are now battling superbugs and superweeds resistant to pesticides. They're damaging crop and farm equipment and costing the farmers more money and having to apply heavier doses of toxic pesticides to treat these insects every year. Unlike safety evaluations for drugs, there are no human clinical trials for genetically modified foods. The only published human feeding experiment revealed that the genetic material inserted to genetically modified food soy transfers into bacteria living inside our intestines and continue to function. This means that long after we stop eating GM foods, we may still have their genetically modified proteins produced continuously inside us. If the antibiotic gene inserted to the food crops were to transfer, it could create super diseases resistant to antibiotics. If the gene then creates Bt toxins and the GM core were to transfer, it might turn our intestinal bacteria into living pesticide factories. Economic hazards are being created as farms that do not use genetically modified foods cannot compete with the big farms that do use this option. This is eliminating competition between the farmers. Another economic impact is seeds are patented and farmers are actually being sued for keeping small amounts of seeds around that they buy from the companies, as these big companies are actually going after them and suing them for the money that the farmers use for keeping these seeds. And this is forcing the farmers to buy the seeds every year from these big companies and costing the farmers more and more money and making the corporate giants more and more money. In conclusion, there are too many questions and not enough studies on genetically modified foods and what their long-term effects will be on our children. We must have more studies before we trust these modifications with our children. I personally do not want to be a lab rat, and think we all at least have the right to know what we are eating.